lead meeting last lead network meeting here prior to Labor Day weekend. On a Labor Day weekend, that feels very different than what we know as normal. So I've worked with a number of schools in the last week here. Continue to be impressed with how you use your guidelines and then the processes you have in place, especially for those of you that have programs that have been interrupted, and there's a number that have due to COVID rationale. So thanks again for your work and the work that you're doing. We have a full half an hour, I think, here for you today. We had great feedback about how we operated last week with Chat to Host. Again, we would like to utilize chat, and that chat goes back to Laura. I think today is our host, and we'll watch for questions that we're able to answer here today around topics. And if you enter those questions that you might have that are related to the subject, we'll try and get to those today. If not, we'll continue to answer those through the FAQs, and those FAQs for next week will come to you Tuesday due to the fact that Monday will be Labor Day. So Laura, at this time, if we could go to our slides, please. Just a reminder, or is it Susie today? I think that's running our slides. Thank you, Susie, for doing so. One of the things that we're going to do as well with using chat back to host is the agenda will come out to you with the invite. So you have an idea of what we will be covering on those days. And again, having the opportunity to create questions maybe that don't fit within that agenda into the chat, we'll address those in the FAQs. So we're going to look at all of these topics here today, spend a little more time on some than others, but just so you're aware of what we will be covering, and hopefully it's essential to the work that you're doing currently right now. And if we can move forward there, Susie. Again, last week we said that we're going to start meeting every other week. So following Labor Day, for many of you, your first week back in school or in a hybrid setting, whatever learning model you're in, that our next meeting will be Thursday, September 17th. And again, as I mentioned, the agendas will come out to you at 9 a.m. along with the invite, and encourage you to use chat as possible. That being said, I'm going to turn it over to Laura at this time, who will talk all things technology.
Good morning, everyone. Just a few updates for you. As you know, we continue to move through a rollout that we knew was going to take people's time and energy, and just did not anticipate all of the other things that people would be spending their time and energy on this spring. Fall, actually, we've moved to that already. Our school's information, you should have received an invitation from our schools, and also information in the update to attend a session either this morning or again at 12:30. Same session repeated twice, talking about some of the opportunities to expand your use of our schools, which may include rosters and results. Those will be some of the opportunities that you'll have things to sync things to the new Minnesota State High School League website. So it's really kind of a getting ready and learning to be ready when those things are available on the website. Those sessions and tutorials for that will be recorded, and those will also be posted on the website's Getting Started guide. As of late last week, co-ops should be displaying correctly on the public side of the website. If you are a host school, you are still seeing that twice on your dashboard, close to getting that piece taken care of. If you are still seeing co-ops incorrectly, an email to info@mshsl.org should help you get that figured out, and we'll sort through those for you. A couple of notes on where to look for things. The league updates that are coming out to you into your email box, those updates are also posted for your reference and archiving in the league updates section of your dashboard. So those red brand or blue branded emails that you're getting that have a number of topics in, if you need reference back to those, they are at the top of your AD dashboard in that league updates section. All of the documents around COVID-related, sport-related information changes, those are all archived in one place And on the right side of your AD dashboard, you'll see a tab called Sports Guidance and Information, COVID related. That list has now grown to about 15 items. But again, the goal there is to put all of those into one spot. Additionally, coaches and coaches education, please continue to work with your fall approved sports coaches to get them in and make sure that their learning is all done. We'll be moving into other coaches coming up soon also. We continue, as some of you know, to have a little bit of an issue with those emails going to some people depending on exactly how the coach signs up, and want to keep other coaches out as long as possible to get to that point. So with that, I'm going to turn it back to Bob at this point.
Great, thanks, Laura. And we continue to appreciate your work, all things technology, in our website, and we're looking forward to better and bigger things even coming as we move forward, working with Gravity Works. At this time, I'm going to turn it over to Eric, who's going to talk a little bit further. Eric, and if we could go to the next slide there, please, Susie. Actually, we're in the progression here, Susie, or Laura, I believe this is you as well, continuing on the progression around decision-making and communication where we're at, and then we'll go to Eric. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thanks, Bob. Again, this is a list that you have seen multiple times by this point. The check marks continue to move down the list. The two documents that we are still aiming to get to you before Labor Day. One is one that we're going to look at a little bit later in this session. It is a COVID interrupted competition guidelines, is where that has been named, and we'll look at that later. The second document that is still targeted for today or tomorrow is a category 2, which really includes fine arts activities. So those will be coming to you today or tomorrow. We've also added some target dates for the things that had been labeled as just after Labor Day. So you see that the postseason document is targeted for on or before September 18th. And we do not believe that the calendar piece will be finalized until after the board meeting, which is October 1st. So again, just to give you some dates to look for on those documents. And again, just a reminder that all of those documents are in one place on the right-hand side of your AD dashboard. That sport information pieces there. So at this point, I think I will turn it over to Eric. We're getting a little bit tongue-tied here today. And Eric's going to talk a little bit about a document that MDH released earlier this week.
Thanks, Laura, and appreciate everybody's work in putting all of this information together. Good morning to everyone on the call here today. It's great to have nearly 300 folks again here on a Thursday as we lead into Labor Day. Just want to recognize the work that each one of you is doing within your local school and in your programs, in the work that you're providing to make sure that they're able to move forward and process appropriately as they go through each one of the activities. And so, Susie, if you're able to pull up that document, would be great. You're going to see an example of a document here that should be something that your school leadership is working with. And so I think we're looking for slide number 6, if you could, the one with the MDE, there we go, or MDH, right? So this is just an example of just what you do and how you look at a particular situation. And if this isn't a good example of how complex our world has become around these things, this is just trying to identify a student within either your program or within your school and how we should work with those individuals as we go forward. So a couple of things that I just want to point out. The first two kind of layers across the top really focus on how to identify if a student is at risk and what we should be doing. And so that assists your school, and this would be what your school health professional would be using to try and identify how do we operate forward. I think the area I'd like to focus on is down toward the bottom. It says for people who are close contact with someone who tested positive. This is one that you get to deal with likely more than anything around those folks who might be in your programs and might have contact with a student who did test positive, either in a social setting or within your program. And I think one thing that's important to remember in this, and that's the next statement right over there, is that a student, whether or not they test, if they have close contact with a positive case, are out for 14 days. The other recommendation is that they don't test immediately after someone else tests, that they wait 5 days so that they can actually have an accurate test, because a test is only as good as the day that it's taken. And so again, folks may have to sit out as far as the time frame from a close contact, even if they have a negative result on a test. And we want negative results. The other part is they could be asymptomatic for a while or even throughout having a positive test. And so the goal is to, again, reduce that particular aspect of transmission. Secondary piece on that is if you do have a positive case, make sure that you're addressing that appropriately. We are talking more about whether or not we should have a return to participation clearance form for our medical folks to be able to bring students back into programs. That's been a pretty regular question of how do we deal with that? How much time do they need to have? If they sit out and they are not participating at all, the language that's been used for a long time is to have the requisite number of practices to identify that the student is both in strong enough health, has the stamina, the strength, and also is prepared for competition. And so there's not been a set number as long as they go through the initial season aspect. But again, we're looking to see if we need to go further and have had conversations already with sports medicine and looking for more there. So again, just another tool comes from the Minnesota Department of Health, and your school leadership should be using this as well within the school setting. We will turn it back to Bob, I think, is taking the next piece.
Yeah, great. And we appreciate that, Eric. And my understanding is that document will be located on your on the microsite, which is located on the dashboard that hopefully assists you in finding this type of information around COVID. Again, segueing into COVID, and we look, as I mentioned earlier, we have had COVID interruptions right into seasons. And if we could go to that slide, please, Susie. When we think about COVID interruptions, and when we have schools wondering, what does that look like? So there's a couple scenarios that we are aware of. Yeah, just the slide itself. Perfect. Thanks, Susie. So if school A, if they're unable to play and school B is able to play, what happens to that, right? And during the regular season, we run out of time as the season is scheduled right now quite often. Yet, what do we call that game? Is it a forfeit? Is it postponed? Those are questions that we continue to get. There has been questions around co-ops, and it may be maybe such as this, that we're in a co-op. One of our schools that is in a co-op is in required distance learning due to the county metric, yet the other school is not. So how do we move forward and how do we play? What you will find in a document that we're creating that will have you in the next 12 to 24 hours is that schools that that do not fit within that metric and are not in required distance learning, they can continue to play if you're able to field that team or play that game with those students. And then there's you know, co-ops around one, you know, there's players that have COVID. You know, again, that's going to be more team related than it is school related. So the document that we're working on that will assist you on a number of different scenarios that occur during COVID interruptions. If we could share this or an example of that, if you could pull that up, Laura or Susie. This is what it's going to look like. And we're going to quickly just go through it and give you the different categories, what those look like, you know, what's recommended, what versus what's required. And if you scroll down a little bit and keep going there, Susie, you'll see once we get into postseason, maybe those questions will become more prevalent or more pressing. And then just above where we were at, it does mention the co-op piece, right? So those are examples of what you will see. I believe this is a working document. As scenarios come forward, we'll enter that into this format and into this, this sheet or this form that will assist you around scenarios that occur when there are COVID interruptions. And again, if there's things, and Susie, if you could maybe just scroll through again so they can see some of the different topics that exist within this form. If you've had scenarios where you have questions or categories that maybe you aren't seeing on this form, if you would enter those into the chat, we'll continue to monitor those and try and address them here yet if we can today, or again in the FAQs that will be sent out on next Tuesday. Other than that, and Laura, if you'd monitor the chat on that, if we can answer any of those questions, we're happy to do so. Otherwise, I'm going to turn it back to Eric and Laura at this point.
Thanks again, Bob. And the next piece of the presentation is something that we previewed last week, and we are now getting ready to send that information out, and that is around data collection and being able to take a look at what's happening within those particular interruptions that you're having. And so, Susie, if you want to pull up that slide from the PowerPoint would be great, and just touch on those just one more time, because you've probably only seen it one time. And so on that slide, you see that what we're really looking for is we're looking for school data, and it's going to be by sport, and there's going to be a document, and there's going to be a very easy way to be able to work through that and identify and answer the questions that are part of that. And so we'll take a look at that. But again, the purpose is for us to monitor what our seasons look like. It's a large organization with 4 different sports and a couple of them having multiple genders going at this time, wanting to see what those numbers actually are. We continue to need more data on what the impact of COVID-19 is on the activities that we provide and also on the safety for our students. It's going to inform an awful lot for our board and for our return to participation as far as how things are going and what practices are best. And then again, you see down at the bottom, the method of collection is we're going to try and do this on a every 2-week basis, and that's going to be on Fridays. So the first one would be to do that for tomorrow if you could, or at any time through the weekend that might work. We'll send an email as a reminder to complete those, and those will be located on your dashboard. And so, Susie, if you want to go to the example of what that form is, or if Laura, you're able to share that, would be great, and be able to pull up what that document or that form looks like, could be really helpful to be able to see. But in general, what you're going to see is that you're going to see a number of questions, some school data to begin with, and then from that school data, it's going to just be a lot of check marks and being able to see that and to walk that through. And if you don't have a particular sport, you just click no, we don't have it, and it'll take you to the next sport. And the goal is that in 3 to 5 minutes every 2 weeks, you're going to be able to get that completed. So not sure that I'm seeing that form right now on the screen, and so certainly maybe we'll be able to circle back to that, but our goal is to try and gather that information, and if you have questions, certainly contact the league office and we can assist in getting that taken care of. So I think that I do have the next slide as well, Susie, so if you want to pull that up, I can segue there, and if we get a chance to go back to that and you have that, let me know and we'll take a look at it. But let's pull up the PowerPoint if we can and share that, and then we'll go back to the next piece. And this is one that we've had challenges with. If you click on that, will that work or not? We can do things in real time. All right, so there we go. There's what you're looking at. And again, that's where it is. It has the due dates that are on it. And so again, as you just kind of scroll up a little bit slowly, you put in your school name, you put in the person that's providing that information. And then as you continue down through it, you're going to select what your role is. And so you might be you as activities director, might be you as the assistant activities director, or it might be you as administrative assistant, whoever's on this call and might be completing that, right? And so the email, so if we have questions or any concerns, we can do that. And then you'll continue to provide a little bit of data so that we can identify by region, and then what current format you're in for your learning method. Are you distance learning? Are you hybrid? Or are you in person? And then, for example, as you take a look at that, the first thing up is boys cross country. If you would click on no, it looks like the survey is done. However, if you click on it, now it's going to go to the next sport. It's going to populate to girls cross country, etc. It will continue to go through that and see that. So let's say we say yes on boys soccer, just as an example. Now you're going to get some additional questions. And the first one is, have you had any incidents? If you have, now you're going to answer some more questions about it. But if you haven't, it's going to be no. And so again, it's trying to limit the number of questions that you have, and then it's going to move on to the other sports that you have. and you can work your way through it. So hopefully it's operating exactly as it should. It will gather information for us in a combined data piece, and we'll be able to see it by sport, by region, and also by whether it's gender or just even your particular school and how many happen to be impacted. So I think it can be a real easy tool to use, but also provide some real significant data for us to monitor where that is at. So
just a quick note of clarification of that. That link will live on your dashboard, and it will live there for the next number of weeks. We'll ask that you complete it every other Friday, and we will send you a reminder on those Fridays. We did also notice today that as with LEAD going every other week, it is the day after LEAD meetings going forward. So we'll be able to give a reminder, but do look for it on your dashboard, but then know that we'll also remind you to do it.
Great job, Susie. Thanks for pulling that up. And if you can switch back to PowerPoint, we'll step into slide 9. Slide 9 is going to talk about finance and where we are as a league. I think a couple of things that are kind of prior to even discussing the detail in this information is that the State High School League continues forward. We continue to provide the benefits and services that we have to the greatest extent possible within this. And so we are here every single day and working as hard as we can to take in all of the information, assist in leadership within your schools, provide the governance and the eligibility rulings that need to be taken care of. And I think first and foremost, as we're doing things right now, is it's the support that's being provided to membership. The number of calls, the number of emails, because of the unknowns or the new experiences that we have, the new rules that are out there, the new formations of how we do practice and what we do with infections and all of those things are just ongoing and nonstop. And so summer has had a different kind of what I would call tempo on a usual basis, but this year it's been far from the same tempo as a normal summer. And I think if you're in a school, you can recognize that there's a difference between summer tempo and when we get back into fall. But this year it's been nonstop, just like we've been on this call 21 of the last 22 weeks. So I think that that's really important. And we just really appreciate the work that you've done and the way that you've supported us. I think another thing is that, like your jobs, a lot of the work that's being done goes in before we get to the participation aspect. A lot of the planning, a lot of the paperwork, a lot of the organization, all of that goes in on the front end. And then add to it this year, the redesign that we've had to do for each one of our activities, whether that be based on reductions in season, whether that be on health requirements or whatever it might be, and even within creating training seasons and all the work that's gone into that have been significant. And we anticipate that that's going to continue forward for this year. That's the way that it's going to be, and we're going to continue to modify and adjust as we go forward. But when we go down to the second part and talk about trying to create a budget in this situation, we know that we have a current reality of ongoing service and responsibility, and that we have operational costs that will continue. And our goal is to maintain all of our services and activities to the best that we can for every one of our students. We know that tournament revenue is unlikely or uncertain at best. And that again, that 75% of our revenue comes from our tournaments on a typical year. And without that, that's going to be really difficult. We know that expenses are reduced if we don't have tournaments in the same way. And yet there's still an appetite to try to have some kind of postseason. So there will be some cost. And so the task force that took a look at this, and then the board of directors, is operating on a membership-based revenue approach. So that means that there's a significant increase that's been approved by the board of directors. That information includes the statement that any surpluses that would be retained this particular year would be returned to schools either via refunds or credits. And so should our revenues be in excess of what our costs are for the current year, that money will go directly back to schools or will be credited on future membership. And the information is going to come out in this way. So an email notification will go out as soon as those are sent. We anticipate those hitting the mail either later today or tomorrow morning. And so an email will also go to superintendents and to ADs to let them know that that packet of information is coming in. Within that, you're going to see background information. You're going to see membership and all of those things that are part of it. But then it's also going to have the new funding model that's out there. And so you'll see that stuff in print. But I think an important number to remember is that We're going from a $9 million budget to something that's around $5 million. And so that's about a 45% reduction in what our expenses are. But even with that reduction, that's got a lot of different cuts and things like that are part of that. Our membership has typically only supported about 1.2 million up until this year, with the plan to move that to 1.9, but to get to 5 is significant. So there will be a change in membership that will be very noticeable for our schools, and that information is all provided in there and should be out to schools within the next couple of days based on a mailing that will come out, and that will go directly to superintendents or presidents or heads of school, whoever that happens to be as your governance group within the school setting. So that is where we are with the finance side of things, and glad that you're here and able to hear this information, and you'll have a chance to digest it further when you see that. So with that, I'm going to spin it back to you, Bob.
Great, thanks, Eric. And we're going to save the best to last. You know, the questions we continue to get about where are we going next, right? And Laura did a nice job of summarizing that in the progression. And the Return to Participation Task Force reconvened yesterday afternoon. And as Susie will show on the slide, our number one priority as of right now is to get you answers as quick as possible about what our fall season, what that postseason looks like, right? For that period of time, we need some answers for you. We're also going to learn some things as students come back into our buildings and how we're able to operate, but we need a plan for that postseason. We made great progress in that. We'll continue to do so. Both our staff are making recommendations, and our Return Participation Task Force does look a little different this time around. We did add 2 region secretaries as well to give us that postseason reference and or dialogue with that. We know equally as important that the remainder of the school year, what that looks like, what that framework or template is going to look like, knowing that it may change as we go, as we learn around COVID. You got a chance to see my signature there too. Thanks, Susie. That being said, the timing on that, again, our board has a work session on the 15th of September, and I would imagine that determinations will be made, again, more on the dates, the scope, and the sequence for the remainder of the year, not just the winter schedule. We'll see that on October 1st. Within that, we've also had the questions around captain's practices and open gyms. And I really separated those two. So we talked to liaisons about that on Tuesday of this week, and then we brought it to the Return to Participation Task Force yesterday. And in between, we had our eligibility committee meeting as well. And again, continue to ask questions around open gyms and captain's practices. Where there are concerns around them have to do with supervision, making sure we're following MDH guidelines. How do we make sure pods are in place? All of those things, again, apply to captain's practices and open gyms. But separating those due to the nature of open gyms. Open gyms are set to be determined by students and or spontaneous recreation, as Craig would often say, right? So someone could come up to an open gym and play either basketball or volleyball or whatever it is that they may decide to do. And how do you organize that and remain within MDH guidelines? Just so you know that the executive committee did recommend yesterday 5-0 that, again, we move forward suspending open gyms for the remainder of the seasons. That will go to the exec committee. I believe they're meeting next week. Captain's practices, there was no recommendation at this time. In fact, we're looking for further information. I would say our liaisons, there was probably 3 different messages that we heard. Leave it at local control, or just allow us to do it, or please suspend it like you did for the fall season. So again, we're going to continue to look at captain's practices moving forward. We'll continue to look at open gyms, and we know with open gyms as well that there's parts of our state and in many ways will not deter participation from occurring in other venues. What we're simply going to say around open gyms and or captain's practices, however it goes, whatever the determination is, that it's going to be according to bylaw 208. And again, remember when it comes to captain's practices in bylaw 208, that it talks about school officials being aware of the activities that are taking place with captains. We do not believe the school administrator's responsibility to see a group of students at a local park playing basketball, to define that as captain's practice. That is something you would not be aware of, and that would not be your responsibility. Yet we are worried about captain's practices in open gyms and how it might impact our school environments and our controlled environments moving into the winter season or into future seasons. So we'll get you information as those determinations are made around both open gyms and or captain's practices. And again, I think as we look back to our tournament dates or our postseason, what that looks like, postseason competition, that we'll have that recommendation for the board, hopefully before our workshop on September 15th. And Susie, if you could go back to the slide again.
Can I just step in really quickly? You made a comment in regard to a recommendation 5.0. That group that met yesterday prior to return to participation was the eligibility committee, and they had some preliminary conversations regarding a number of the return to participation aspects and did discuss both captain's practices and open gyms. And so the 5.0 vote was from the eligibility committee. We have some folks on the executive committee that are also on this call and are curious, did I miss a vote or where's that at? But that was eligibility that provided that. Return to participation did talk about that somewhat yesterday in their groups. And so that's moving forward with additional discussion at this time.
Great, Eric. Thanks for that, that clarification. That's very important. I think what I wanted to go back to the slide as well here is our process for the decision making. So there will be things that will occur as we continue to move forward before we get to the board. And if you look at the bulleted points down below, as we continue to create options and hopefully recommendations, we will also be in contact with sport-specific representatives, region secretaries, liaisons that work with us as well. Our Tuesday lead liaisons will have an opportunity to view those as well and provide feedback back to the task force, right? That should be a two-way communication to make sure. We have a little more time this time. If you think about how things worked in the fall with the governor's return to learn models and how little time we had to modify the recommendations that were in place from the return to participation task force, yet, you know, we're very close. Again, we don't have a lot of time to be able to do that. So that's the decision making that the process and how those decisions will be made. And again, we'll use formats such as this to work with you and communicate. Laura, do we have any questions within chat that we should address right now?
So I've seen a couple of questions. One is asking about who's on that return to participation task force. I know we've shared that, but I'm trying to find out exactly where that list is.
And again, the return to participation task force is our eligibility committee, which is of members of our board. Then it's also members within the liaison with, I'd say 3 to 4 others that don't exist on either. Our region secretaries would be an example. Brent Shimmick as president of MNI AAA is another one that is on that task force. So that's a sampling of who exists on that task force. Again, there's representatives from around all 8 geographic regions, privates and publics, large and small, and somewhere in between schools, represented on that task force. Anything else, Laura?
I'm going to pull up a slide here just because this question continues to come up, and I just lost where it was. It's the slide that talks about,
I think
maybe I'm not.
Learning.
So the question continues to come up about who's required to be virtual and who's required or who's allowed to play in person, and how do co-ops play into that? How do privates and homeschools move into that? So Bob, if you want to just give a reminder, and I will try to find that slide with that grid also.
Yeah, and I appreciate everyone's patience too. I know we're running above and beyond here today. So when, again, distance learning is probably a red flag for you, right? So many of you will say, we're in distance learning. It feels like maybe we can or cannot play. For the required distance learning. So if your school is governed by the county metrics, and I think what MDA would say, or MDE would say, is that we would like all schools to participate in this, whether or not you're private and or public or homeschool. Use those county metrics when they're in place. So if you're that school due to the county metric that is required to go to distance learning. Your participation now only becomes virtual, right? And we know that we have some schools yet today that will be determined heading into that county metric, and therefore are not able to participate starting as soon as tomorrow, other than in virtual coaching. If you're a school that's in that hybrid setting or a hybrid learning model or in person, yet individuals and or the school has been approved to go to distance learning, we're going to call that voluntary distance learning, right? Either as an individual family or and as a school, you can continue to participate in person, both practice and or competition. If you're in a co-op, and if one of your schools in your co-op is required to go to distance learning, members of the team from that school would not be allowed to participate in person as a part of that co-op, while the remaining schools, if they are in a different learning format, they would continue to be able to participate in person. Now, that's if you have enough to create a roster for that team. We understand that that's another layer that you have to deal with. And again, we know that we have schools that are working through that. Continue to ask questions. Quite often we see ADs that's, you know, they will hear this and then they get to that point and say, wait a minute, I heard this, but now that it applies to me, it feels really different. And we understand that. We're going to work with you. I think getting that data real time or every 2 weeks really benefits us, and we can share that out with member schools to assist in looking at what those numbers and any other information looks like. Hopefully, does that sound, Laura, like the question, it answered the question from within chat?
Yes, I believe you got to all of them. Thank you.
Anything else within chat?
Lots of comments and feedback about open gyms and captains practices, which continue to be very good. Still challenges by ADs around scheduling makeup games and getting too tight with number of contests each week above and beyond.
Right, and those are difficulties that the Return Participation Task Force will continue to look at. I had a great conversation with an AD, just so you know as well, saying, I don't know what winter season is going to look like, but if it's anything like the fall, we're going to have to be really creative around basketball scheduling or hockey scheduling for schools that don't have conferences, right? So those are things that we'll continue to look at with the task force, and I think we'll provide recommendations around those as well. Anything else, Laura?
I think that's it. I think we're done for the day, Bob.
Well, I think our staff has shown today that everyone needs a break. We hope you have a wonderful Labor Day weekend with family and friends mixed in and around. We know competition's still taking place. So we will see you back here in the LEAD Network on Thursday, September 17th. Be safe out there. And again, thanks for the great work. Thanks for the work that you do. And thanks for the manner in which you work with our staff. Have a great afternoon.